And I think that, see,
That's
this
good.
is
That's
the
it.
thing.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's like if you're
That's it.
because it's like, okay, there's times where I could be compassionate where I'm like, okay, you're not black. You have a good heart, but you really just don't
You
understand.
don't know.
You just
You
really
just don't know. Yeah,
And so,
yeah.
and sometimes they're like, can you talk to me? Like, I really want to learn more. And so you got to be able to engage that without being offended that they don't know, because it's like, if you're white, you're only around white people,
Yeah.
and you know you have a heart for people, but you don't understand offense or like what you're saying wrong. It also takes a lot for them to approach someone and say, hey, can you explain this to me?
Yeah. And I was just about to get
Yeah.
on that because what's up, everybody? I'm Alec, and this is another episode of Ode to Black Love podcast. Before we get into the meat of the matter today, make sure you're liking, following, and subscribing to us on all social media platforms. That's at Ode to Black Love on Instagram and TikTok, then Ode to Black Love podcast on YouTube and Facebook. There we go. Also, be sure you follow our social media page because we have an event on June 11th with Kindred Spirits. It is going to be such a good time. So it's not going to be the full day party situation. We're putting a little spin on things, but it's going to be fun. So follow our social media for more details about that. Now that all of the housekeeping is out the way, y'all, we have a really, really good episode today. I'm super excited about it because this is an episode that I've been wanting to put out for quite some time. And I really wanted to talk about mental health. So as y'all know, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And we, as advocates of therapy and advocates of, making sure you're taking care of your mental health, we couldn't escape the month without having a conversation about it. So today I have a very special guest to just go over some mental health topics with. Go ahead and introduce yourself, girl.
Well, I'm Brianna Lewis. I'm an artist, social worker, and entrepreneur. I am married to my husband, Ryan Lewis, and we have a daughter, Rain Lewis, and she is 17 months. So, yeah, we have our little family. I'm just so happy to be here and have this experience with you. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me. So I want to first just dive into, how did you get involved in social work and in the mental health field?
Ooh, it's like it's corny to say, but it's like God will just kind of have you go to the same thing over and over, and either you can accept it or you can deny the calling, right?
Oof.
And so I had a lot of people like say, you'd be good as a therapist, and I'm like, I don't want to do that, you know?
Right, facts, like that ain't for me. Yeah. When was this? Growing up, like in high school, or like this?
Yeah, and yes, because with my family, I was always like the listening ear, and I would always give like really like practical advice about things, and so it was just like, I just like supporting people. So
okay.
I didn't think I wanted that to be like my job.
Right.
It was something I was just like, oh, I don't know. But then with social work, it's kind of a creative industry because you learn so many different skills. So you can use your degree honestly, however you want to use it. But for me, I got my emphasis in clinical social work. So that dives deeper into the mental health aspect, outside of like policy and other things that are included in social work.
Right. Yeah. So why do you think mental health is important? Like, everybody knows that's something that me and Jeremy talk about all the time, especially as it pertains to our relationship. But overall, as a society, why do you think mental health is important to take care of?
Oh my, because the world we live in.
Girl, we'll get there.
The world we live in, and it's like, for us to function as our best selves, we have to take care of our mental health, and it impacts your relationships. Just like what you and Jeremy talk about all the time in your relationship. You can love someone, you could try to give them your all, but if your mental health is not well, then you're going to negatively impact them anyway, and then you'll also struggle in caring for yourself. So it's just like, it has to be a priority, or you're going to deal with some consequences despite your efforts.
Period.
So it's just like, you have to concentrate and be intentional and take care of yourself.
Yeah. So how would you describe mental health? Like, what does it encompass?
Oh my gosh, just so much. Because I know with mental health, people just think like maybe your brain, but I think holistically. So it's just like your physical, emotional, and psychological. And those things are always interacting with each other. And sometimes when we handle things separately, then we are discounting how it's affecting other parts of ourselves. So I always think holistically about it. As far as your mental health, a lot of things that you see often, you think of like depression and anxiety. And even PTSD, but there also are other disorders and things that people are scared to discuss because of taboo or just that fear of something's wrong with me.
Right.
So it's like we kind of have to get away from the mental health discussion being something is wrong.
Yeah.
Everyone, we're people. We are going to interact with events. We're going to have emotional responses to things that are happening to people, and that's how you're made.
Right.
So it's like if you're going to take care of your physical health, then you should also pour into your mental health. So I feel like with mental health, you really have to look at the full picture, so that you are not putting unfair expectations on yourself about like what's going on with you. So.
Absolutely. And so what gets me about mental health, and I think this is where me and Jeremy kind of focus, is like we are very big advocates of therapy, right? But some people are just super skeptical of therapy, specifically within the Black community. Like let's really talk about it. Yeah. So one, why do you think our community is so skeptical of it? Because I have my own opinions on why. But one, why are they skeptical of it? And then two, like what are some alternatives or some ways to ease people into this idea of therapy?
Yeah.
I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and they were talking about like, oh, I don't need therapy. I'm good. Because they have this idea that therapy is for people who have, big problems or these situations that they are just unable to work through, which sometimes is the case. But I feel like there's this stigma around it that is unnecessary.
Yeah. So it's an historical aspect to this conversation. And then there's also just like cultural, right? Like historically, Black people were not included in the mental health discussion. Right. So like even throughout school and learning about disorders, the DSM-5 is what you use to
you said DSM-5?
Yes. It's basically a text that you use to evaluate disorders and mental health conditions.
Okay.
And so we're taught how to read the DSM-5 and assess people for certain symptoms and be able to say, okay, it looks like you're struggling with X, Y, and Z. But with the DSM-5, it was created around like the white heterosexual male.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Okay, and this is still being used.
Yes. So over time, they have created new editions. They've created it's evolved. It's evolved so that it's not discriminatory.
Okay.
But in the past, when this was being created, it put certain groups into disorders and conditions that were based on how they saw them. So if you're living in a racist community or as an agency and the people over it are racist and they're using DSM-5 and you have a Black counterpart, you can easily be like, oh, they're dealing with this. It's because you don't understand their reality. So it's like you can use this text and skew it and not completely understand the person at all. So with that, it's hard for, I would say, Black people and people of color to trust therapists, social workers, or counselors, because it's like, do you truly understand me?
Yeah.
Because at one point, women were diagnosed with hysteria.
Shut up.
Yeah, and this could be over PMS symptoms, something that's so normal, but could be diagnosed with hysteria. And so when I discovered that, I was just like, wow. And so that had to be changed.
Yeah.
Like, so that's just an example I can think off the top of my head, but it's something that, mental health is subjective. So you really have to work through this. And if it's only the white heterosexual male dictating what conditions are there, then you're not getting the full gaze. You got to have multiple people contributing in this space so that you can accurately assess and diagnose people. So,
and how long ago would you say this, I guess, happened? So, like, I guess put it in context, like, when the new edition, when did the new edition start to come out?
The shift started happening when honestly, this is going to be my opinion.
Okay.
I feel like when more Black people get into working in social work or health professions.
Okay.
Because, I mean, even when I was in school, I had to speak on certain things. So, like, for example, when I went to a great school, I felt like I had a really good education. But I did challenge my professors sometimes because there was a class that was over post-traumatic slave syndrome. Okay. And I was like, oh, I'm so glad that y'all are talking about this, right? And both of my classmates were white. But I also was like, you didn't expect a Black student to be here.
Ooh.
And so I kind of challenged her in that space because I'm like, I feel like you all are discussing my reality And it would have been more comfortable for you guys if I wasn't here.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
so we grew a relationship out of that, being able to challenge it. But that's what you have to do. You know, you need couples and families, and you need people,
hitting on stuff.
In those health professions that can challenge those systems and really make people think, so that you're not using what's supposed to be good in a harmful way.
Yeah.
So.
And how do you encourage people to challenge? I think that is something that I see all the time.
Yeah.
So I work in the field of human resources.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you have to challenge the status quo. You have to challenge things and advocate for yourself as well as others that may look like you, or even just others in general.
Right.
And that's not easy.
It's not. It's actually very uncomfortable.
Very uncomfortable.
Being knowledgeable and being able to speak for your experience unapologetically.
Come on.
And that's hard. That's hard. But it's like with practice, you are able to do it with much more finesse. But in the beginning, it is difficult. And I think that's why people kind of shy away from it. And they just avoid it altogether. So, I mean, I feel like you have to give yourself grace in those positions, because you are coming up against a lot.
Right.
Even in higher up institutions, it's difficult for Black people to navigate that space sometimes, because it's like, I deserve to be here, but if I don't speak the way that you speak, then I'm not considered an intellectual or XYZ.
Yes,
you know what I'm saying? Like, these are the things that you really deal with when you're having to challenge people. But one thing I've done is I'll do one-on-one with the leader of the group, so like the professor. Like I'll email them. It's like, hey, can we talk about X, Y? Or I'll address it in like a assignment or something like that.
Yeah.
Or I just find ways. And then like in grad school, it's like all these different platforms that they have for you turn in your assignments, and you can make comments. You can make comments that way. So if there's anybody that's in school, that's ways they can do it. At work, I would always go with a one-on-one meeting.
Period. Yeah.
And if you're going against someone who's completely closed-minded, you got to prepare yourself for that. If it's someone that you feel like just doesn't know, and I think this is the thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you're
that's it.
Because it's like, okay, there's times where I could be compassionate, where I'm like, okay, you're not Black, you have a good heart, but you really just don't understand.
You don't know.
You just don't know.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're like, can you talk to me? Like, I really want to learn more. And so you got to be able to engage that without being offended that they don't know, because it's like, if you're white, you're only around white people. Yeah. And you have a heart for people, but you don't understand offense or like what you're saying wrong. It also takes a lot for them to approach someone and say, hey, can you explain this to me?
Yeah. And I was just about to get on that, because a lot of times I feel like we have to put in so much more effort, right? Because one, like you mentioned, like they don't know, so they may ask questions. So if we prepare our response, they still may be defensive of it. And so it just seems like this mental battle, or this mental obstacle that we got to go through just to prove, I shouldn't even say prove, but just to enlighten people on maybe the microaggressions that we're facing, or just any reality that people are making us feel by just being Black in this space. And so I think that's interesting that you hit on that. And I wonder, like, why do you think we have to go through that? But like, I guess, is there anything that you think we can do to help with that load that we carry? You know what I mean? Because it's heavy sometimes.
There's certain boundaries. So it's like, if you're talking to someone and they react to what you're saying, like they have an emotional response, so you say like, hey, when you said this, it made me feel this way. And then they get upset.
Right.
They're like, oh my gosh, it didn't mean to make you feel that way. It's like, I'm not responsible for how your reaction to what I said. So if you're going to be upset, then it's just like, that's something they have to resolve. That emotional response that they had, that guilt or that shame, they have to resolve that. I'm here. Like, I'm not going to be like, I'm not going to be like, feel bad. But it's like, I'm going to just be like, that's what it is. That's how I feel. Moving forward, that's how you can avoid it. And they can resolve their feelings on their own, because that's their responsibility.
And I think you had talked about this on your social media before. Maybe a situation where you were at Walmart. Girl!
I knew you was going to bring that up.
Because that one touched me to my core, because the situation had happened to me. And I was so pissed off at myself, Brianna, because I fell into it like, oh, no. And I'm consoling you with your, for lack of better words, white tears. And I I just was so pissed off at myself. Like, girl, you fell for the
You're
trash.
a nice person. It's okay.
Girl,
it's okay.
I fell for it. I was so mad at myself.
When it happened to me, it was like, so the situation was, it was a day where everyone was packed in Walmart. It was like some type of tornado warning or something, or so people were just rushing in to get stuff and be in their houses or something, or a storm. It was a storm.
Okay, yeah.
And this woman walked out and she had to get her receipt checked, and she got offended and was like, you know, like, why are you checking my stuff? I didn't steal anything. And she was like, I'm just doing my job. I have to check your receipt. But, and this was a Black woman in the case. And so she got offended. And then the person doing her job got upset that she was upset. And I'm like, well, you know, when you're a person of color and you go in a store, let's not act like people aren't watching you differently.
Come on.
So it's like, I'm sorry that you had to be the one.
Like,
I'm sorry that you had to be the one to catch the fire from her being upset or, you know, her transfer that experience onto you. So when she told me about it, I listened because I'm like, that does kind of suck that you were just doing your job. And I'm going to be nice to you. And I'm going to say, I know you're doing your job. It's okay. But then when she was just like, I was just so horrible and all that. And I was just like, all right, you know, have a nice day.
I love it.
I gotta go. And it's not that I don't have empathy for her, but it's just like, I can't sit here and say that her response to you wasn't valid.
Period. Yeah.
And it's like, if it happens less, then maybe I can be like, okay, sis, like, kind of was out of proportion.
Right.
But when the stuff that's happening today is still happening, it's like,
Yep. What do we do? Yeah, I'm not finna be babying you.
It's like, okay, we have the right to be angry or to be on edge because y'all are creating environments where we're not safe.
Yeah, and that's the reality of what y'all create. Yeah. So somebody gonna have to deal with it. Today it was you.
And it was you.
Today it was you. Yeah, I love that story because it taught me, like, because in the situation that I had, I didn't even recognize that I fell victim to it until your story. And I was like, oh, shit. That literally just happened, but my ass literally, girl, they got me. I'm literally, no, it's not you. Oh my, and I'm really pacifying them in this specific situation. And when I left the situation, I felt bad.
I don't think you should feel bad.
No, I don't know more. But when I left it, I felt so bad because I was like, oh, dang, look at how my actions, which it wasn't even nothing bad. It was actually me advocating for myself and doing something for myself that I was made to feel bad for.
Yeah.
And so after that, I did continue to feel bad. And then I saw that and I'm like, no, why am I feeling bad? Like, you caused this reality. Like, yes, it sucks for you.
Yeah.
But I shouldn't be pacifying you for this. And what it reminds me of is my friend had said this, and we may cut this, we may not. But since we're here, I just want to talk about it. But my friend had spoke about, like, how a lot of times it seems like white women or white people sometimes can't be too far from the victim seat. Like, it seems like anytime, because she ran into a situation similar where she was advocating for herself, speaking up for herself, and immediately it was the white tears and like, oh, no. And it was like, why can't we just do things for ourselves? Like, why does it have to be about you?
It's the emotional hijacking, right? So it's like when you're saying how you feel and the thing is, especially if you're calm about it, you're not being chaotic and you're just saying, hey, when you did this, it brought about this. And they react like, oh my gosh, and they're crying. And it could be the shock of, I just perpetuated racism and now I feel really, really bad about it. And it's like the emotional reaction to that. But it's like, this is not, you can't expect the person who is the victim and saying I was hurt to pacify your feelings. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So it's like, you have to, you know, emotionally regulate and kind of come back if you want to move forward. But if you're just going to be stuck in victim mode, like, oh my God, I don't know, self-pity, I perpetuated racism, then it's just like, there's nothing you can do with that. But you can be accountable and say, wow, I can't believe I did that. Even if you have emotions about it, be accountable and be like, I apologize. I'm so sorry. Thank you for bringing that to me. Then that's an effective conversation, right? But if they're just stuck in the crying and they want you to do that, it's just like, no, we gotta go full circle, because now it's about you and it's not about even why I felt offended in the first place.
Yeah, and you mentioned this this phrase, emotional hijacking. Yeah. Can you dive into that? Because what it immediately made me think of is in relationships.
Yeah.
Like, let's be real. Let's be real. Yeah. In relationships, couples, men and women, can use that. Yeah. And that's unhealthy. So, one, can you talk about what emotional hijacking is? Let me put this down. Because clearly I said too much. But talk about what that is.
Okay, so I talk about things in examples. So that's the best.
I love it. Yes, yes.
So it's like when a couple is talking and one person is communicating a feeling that they had, and then the person who is listening responds to what they're saying with overwhelming emotion, so that now they are the center of the conversation. Mm-hmm. And so the person that went in having the concerns, their needs aren't being met. Ooh. And the person who is having the reaction, now it's all about pacifying them and bringing them down. So the person who eventually went into the conversation like, hey, this is what's wrong. This is how I felt. They're walking away like I got nothing from that. I wasn't validated. Ooh. We didn't address the problem. And I'm still carrying all of this. Mm-hmm. And now I'm carrying this and also trying to make you feel better at the same time. So that's typically how it plays out in relationships.
Well, the reason why I'm looking like that, I feel like I don't really do that anymore. I'm looking at Jeremy. If y'all can hear, I'm looking at Jeremy to make sure like he's not over there shaking his head and shit. But guilty in the past, like
it happens,
and it's like I don't want to say why does it happen because I know it's situational, right? But like, why is it that when people are confronted with the reality of how they make someone feel? Or made someone feel, why is it that they like have such an emotional response? And I feel like sometimes it can be manipulation, but like other times it's genuine. Yeah. So like you kind of mentioned a shock. Yeah. Do you think it's just because of the shock of it?
So. I think sometimes when people really try not to be hurtful and then they hear that they did something to hurt someone anyway, then there is that emotional response like, wow, like, I'm so sorry. I feel so bad. And then they're being confronted with it. It's a lot to process at that moment. So it's like them being overwhelmed with emotion. And then unintentionally, it's like you kind of took center stage with your emotion. Period. And the person who needs change is right now. Just sitting there and they're like, dang. And it just happens, you know, because when and I feel like for like women, it's really just like you try really, really hard. You know, you care. So it's like if you do something wrong and you hurt someone's feelings, you're like, I tried so hard.
Oh my God. I'm sorry I didn't watch them dishes.
I wish I could do better. And they just like, but did you hear what I'm saying?
Period. Yeah. Oh, so how do you encourage, especially couples, but anybody that's in any type of relationship, how do you encourage that accountability piece? Like, have those emotions, right? You're entitled to feel that, right. But like, how do you encourage them to take accountability in those conversations?
Right. So in the dialogue, it's just like, okay, active listening. Like you can have your emotional response, but then go back to addressing why, like what they're saying. Ooh, so good. It's just like reflection is like when you repeat what someone is saying. So it's like I'm hearing you say that this is what you're upset about and I'm sorry and I'll do X, Y, and Z to change it moving forward. But it's like if you're like just stuck in your emotions and you don't bring it back to like I heard what you say and they're like, yes, it sounds like you heard what I said, then it's like their disconnect could happen. So it's like really, really important to verbalize that I heard you say this. Yeah. And they're like, yeah, that's what I mean. I feel really understood right now. So that's the part that really like keeps that accountability.
Yeah. Blah, blah, blah. Put your drink down too.
Accountability. Right. Check. So, yeah.
Okay, so when it comes to situations like that, because you do, unfortunately, have people who take advantage of people and manipulate, I guess, when is enough enough? And not that I know that's going to be situational, absolutely. But like, for example, say there is a person in a relationship who's like, I come to my partner about things that I'm experiencing all the time and all they do is make it about them. What should I do at this point? Like, is there a certain point where you, I guess, communicate to them, like, you get help? Like, I guess, what does it look like when it's being taken advantage of?
Ooh, those boundaries got to change.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, because if you're finding yourself talking about the same thing over and over and you're not being heard, then it's like you have to expect this of them because they're showing you over and over that I'm not ready for the accountability. I'm not really like in a place to accept your truth about me and what I'm in my actions. So it's just like, I can't expect this person to hear me. And the more I engage with them and do this, it's hurting me now. Because now it's like, I feel rejected. I don't feel like I'm being heard. And I'm talking to a wall. You know what I'm saying? So after a while, it's hurting me to even have this conversation with you. And so moving forward, you know, if they did something to hurt you, don't put yourselves in that situation where they can hurt you. Because they're showing right now that they're not in a place to hear you and shift.
Right. Yeah. And I feel like reacting that way impacts the vulnerability, right? Yeah. Like you mentioned, like, if I can't come to you with this, then I maybe feel like I can't be vulnerable with you. Yeah. But on the flip side, I guess, how do you encourage couples to make sure they are vulnerable? So maybe they're not experiencing a situation where they're being taken advantage of. They just stop with, ooh, I have this problem. Instead of mentioning it, I'm just going to shut down. Right. So like encouraging that vulnerable conversation. How do you, what am I trying to say? How do you encourage couples to really have those tough conversations? Yeah.
So it's like, okay, if you know it's a topic where emotions run high. Yeah. Therapy. Therapy.
I was hoping you'd say that.
Please, because it's like after a while you do need a facilitator. Yep. Because at this point you're not even speaking the same language right now. You're not even speaking the same language. Come on. You saying this thing, they saying that, and it's like I don't even hear you. Yes, like it's getting to a point where we're having conversations that is chipping at our relationship because we're just walking away like not understood, and that's happening over and over, and that can really impact the happiness of your relationship because it's just like they don't understand me, I understand them, and we're just wasting our time, walking away frustrated every single time. So it's like going to therapy, and then learning how to have those conversations where you can emotionally regulate. Like there's certain things like as far as me and Ryan that we do where we don't like a certain voice levels like don't surpass a certain thing because we both get triggered with like yelling. No cussing at each other. Like, you know, certain things, like we know what our triggers are and because we know it'll flip. It'll flip. You know, if it's like you pass those, you know, so like I feel like every couple should really sit down and say like, when we're talking to each other, when you speak to me this way, it's like, I can't hear you. Like I'm shut down, and just kind of like have a rules about those hard conversations because they're going to happen. Or it's just like, you know when you're not getting anywhere. You're like, okay, we're not getting anywhere with this, so maybe let's table this where we can kind of think about this some more and get back to it, you know? Because sometimes we'll try to force that conversation.
Guilty.
Me too.
Guilty. Like, no, let's talk about it now. And he needs time to process, and I'm not respecting that time that he needs. I'm like, I want to get it out the way.
We want relief, right? We want to.
I need it off my chest because I want to be happy.
I want to be done with it.
Yes, I want to be done. Like, okay, we're done arguing. I want to cuddle. Meanwhile, he ain't finished processing it, so he ain't trying to cuddle with me and do all of that fun stuff. So
I'm like, he's still upset,
right? Like, you still mad? He like, hell yeah, I'm still mad. You didn't give me time to process nothing. That's one thing I feel like Jeremy and I have had to learn is like he's going to process stuff way differently than I am. So giving him space, like he really needs space after a situation happens, and that doesn't mean like, oh, I'm about to leave and be gone. No, it just means like just give me time to just process what just happened and how I feel about it. Whereas to me, I'm like, oh, we're done. Like,
and it's like important you know that about him, right? Because it's like it can trigger your own stuff when you see how someone responds to you. So it's just like, for me, when I hadn't worked through this, seeing him take space felt like abandonment.
100%.
It was just
why do you hate me?
Oh no, like like you're upset, you're isolating yourself. We're not gonna be able to talk about him over here. Like it's just it just that fear just comes up, and it's like no, they just need time to think through this. Yeah. And so you kind of have to sit with that discomfort for a while and learn how to cope with it. Yeah. So that you're not spiraling, making the worst of the situation and all of that.
And then making it worse. Because I know in the past, it would be like, so you really just going to be over there mad? Like, girl, it's really just been 30 minutes. Like, can I have my hour? Like, come on. And he over here laughing because he's like, this is so real. And I think it's so important to learn the style of communication and how your person processes things because it could be completely different from yours, and that's okay. Like I think a lot of times, and even today, if me and Jeremy are so used to being on the same page that any type of misalignment is like, Now you really believe it. Like now the person that I've been married to for 5
Right.
and it could be the dumbest thing.
Right, the dumbest thing.
The dumbest thing, but whenever we're out of sync, it's like, oh my God, do you really not agree with me on
I can't believe this.
And really recognizing that, like, because this happened today. I ain't gonna lie to you. It happened today, and I had to really say, okay, Germ, okay, Germ.
Right.
And it was very probably, it probably wasn't the best, like, let's stop the conversation. Yeah. But it worked at the time because, like, he went his separate ways. I kind of stayed doing what I was doing. And then, like, 20 minutes later, it was like, okay, like, let's come back. And I asked him some questions, and it was all good. But I knew that if I didn't shut down the conversation or he didn't shut down the conversation, we would have continued on this cycle of I think me that was trying good. To get him to understand what I was trying to say. He never, I don't think you ever did. Would you say? No. I really wanted him to agree with me. But why do, you know what? Let's take it off a little bit. Why do we be wanting that? Like, why do you think we always want to be agreed with? Just as humans. You ain't got to have a real answer. I just want to know. Because I really be thinking Jeremy has to agree with me.
Right. I mean, I feel like just the comfort of like, we think the same way about this. I don't have to be open to thinking differently about it, you know? Like, I don't really have to shift or change or adapt.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Hello?
Like, yeah. So when it's like someone's different from you, then you're like, wow, I've really got to change the way I respond. Like, I really have to consider like their point of things. And I may not be completely right.
And on top of me not being right, like, we both may be right.
Right.
I may be wrong. Like, it's just so many variables that, what you say, are uncomfortable.
Yes.
Like, it's just uncomfortable.
I don't want to think about that.
Right. Let's just be on the same page, like always.
Right.
But okay, let's kind of pivot just a little bit. And I want to talk to you about, I guess, mental health when it comes to relationships. Mm-hmm. And so, like, let me tell just the story to kind of lead into the question. So, I don't know, a few years into me and Jeremy's relationship, I knew I always kind of struggled with anxiety, like just being anxious about stuff. It runs in my family. So I never thought of it as something that would be very impactful in my life. I just knew it kind of existed. Fast forward a few years into me and Jeremy's relationship, it really took a turn, and I started having like a panic attacks, or anxiety attacks is what they were. And just having these situations where I was really anxious beyond my control, where in the past I could really control it. It was just more like a fear.
Right.
And in those moments, luckily me and Jeremy were in a place where, well, I think I just had to be vulnerable with them about it because he witnessed it.
Right.
But I want to talk to you about, in those situations, as couples like are facing their own mental health battles. One, how do you suggest the partner support them in that?
Right.
What are some indicators that maybe they are going through something that they're not vulnerable about, or that they're not sharing with you? And then for the person who is experiencing it, how do you encourage them to just be vulnerable and tell their partner, especially if they're married, because that's something that will impact them.
Right. Right. Ooh,
that was a lot of questions in one. Yeah, let's start. Let's start with key indicators.
Yeah.
So if I'm the partner experiencing it, what should my partner be looking for?
Yeah. So insomnia is like you're having trouble sleeping.
Okay.
Like if you're fidgety and irritable. Like I really feel like irritability is a big one in marriage, because it's like all I did was leave the cup right there, like, and then someone's irritated. It's like we would never argue about certain things. So if you find yourself just bickering, then it's like, okay, something's going on. I would think like brain fog, like having the inability to like think clearly, or it's like I just can't really think right now, or like not being able to focus, stuff like that. Like you can tell something's wrong. Like if you know your partner and they're acting like not like themselves, then that's like, okay, let me kind of observe their behavior more, because they're not acting like the person that I know them to be. Fatigue. If we're doing our everyday stuff, but out of nowhere it's like you don't have the energy for anything, that's telling you something. Or some people get really like busy when they're overwhelmed. Just trying to put their attention on different stuff, can't sit still, not around, not spending time, you know what I'm saying? Just like, okay, they're trying to keep busy because they're not wanting to deal with something.
Right.
So I would look at the fatigue, the insomnia if they're not sleeping at night, the irritability, and if they're trying to distract themselves with a lot of
and if
things.
you see that, how do you encourage them to bring it up? Because that can be a tough conversation.
Right. And they might not even know that they're doing it.
Exactly.
So you could just be like, hey, I would just speak on what you're observing. Like, I kind of noticed that, you've been like super busy. Like, do you have the energy for all that? Like, or they'll be like, I want to get a lot of things done. And they're like, oh, wow, I didn't even notice that. Or, you just kind of elaborate, just kind of open the conversation. Like, I noticed that you've been irritable and it's, I want to help you feel better. So if you're always coming in with like, I'm really here for you and I want to help you and it's not judgmental because you're like, dang, you just irritable. I don't even want to be around you.
You've been tripping,
man. Then they like, I don't want to talk to you.
Yeah,
like 10 for 10, don't want to talk to you. Yeah. But if it's coming in like, I want to help you get through this and I feel like something's wrong and I'm here to help you. So like, I think that empathy and that language helps people bring their walls down.
Okay. And so then for the partner who is, maybe they are aware of what's going on. Like, ooh, I know I've been hella anxious. I know maybe it's the specific situation that's going on with me. How do you encourage them? Or what are some things that they can do to communicate that to their partner? Because I know that space can be tough. For sure. You don't know how they're going to respond. For sure. Like for me, I'll speak on our situation. When I was going through that, I didn't know why. I didn't know what. Still kind of don't, but I'm in the process of therapy. Paying somebody to help me figure it out. Right. But like, how do you encourage them to just be vulnerable?
That's hard. If you're married and you're like, we in this together, it's like you kind of have to be open to their healthy conflict because someone may not be ready to like accept that there's a mental health thing that's happening, and they may challenge it like, what do you mean? Like, what is anxiety? What are these things? You know what I'm saying? Like, you really just have to be really patient and non-judgmental with each other in those spaces because you have to understand these are two different people and one person may be very understanding of mental health, another person may be like, I don't really want to touch that. You know? And so it's just like really just kind of talk about it and let the person digest what they can. And like I said, just be very patient. Really gauge it. Like if you know your partner and you know like, okay, they're open. They love mental health. Then they'll be like, oh, yeah, I get it. But if they're kind of like come from a family where no one talks about that, then it really may be new information, So I would just kind of say, if I'm struggling with anxiety, I'm like, man, when I'm anxious, it's really hard for me to like feel comfortable. Like, that's good. I don't really want to speak. And these are the things that make me anxious. And they're like, okay, all right. And they may ask questions. Yeah. Like, I feel like the person who's listening asks questions. Right. Ooh, that's like, good. Okay, so be like, curious. Yeah, be curious. Because I feel like that makes the person who's struggling like think about it too. Like, when you're in these circumstances, I feel really anxious. So I would create an environment where you're learning about that person.
I love that.
And just like I'm learning you and you learning me, and let's keep the judgment out of it.
Ooh, the judgment piece. Yeah. Because it can be easy to judge somebody else's, even in your relationship, right? Like you love your partner so much, but because I can't relate, I may be judging you or classifying you as one thing and like, oh, she anxious again, like let me kind of blow that off, or like, oh, let me just fall back, when the reality is maybe that's not what that person needs at that time. Don't classify them or box them in.
Ooh, you said something there. Like,
what'd I say?
The needs, like what I need in this situation.
Come on,
because sometimes you'll say, this is what I'm struggling with, and the person's like, okay. And you're like, oh, like, what do you want me to do? Like, what do you want me to do? And so sometimes it's like, if you're going to have that conversation about what you're going through, like, also inform your partner on how they can support you. Ooh. And don't be mad if they don't know how. Right. Like, you should know.
And I think that's really important because, like, sometimes you don't even know how you need the support. Right. So you really have to do some self-assessing to realize, like, what do I need from myself to get better? What can my partner help me with to get better? And like really diving into that, because you can't expect them to help you. Maybe they still can, but maybe you can't expect them to help you if you don't really know what you need. Right. And so I think that's interesting. And I want to talk to you about, because I think we might have hit on this earlier a little bit, but I can't remember. When it comes to figuring out those needs, like how do you encourage them to do those self-assessments on, what do I need in this moment that I'm anxious? Or how do I prevent myself from getting to an anxious space? Ooh, I can't talk. And then also like identifying like what does self-care or prevention of these things like anxiety, depression, things like that. What does that look like?
Okay, so I would say that's like learning some coping skills.
Because
it's like, and it's healing's a journey, right? So it's like you realize the symptom of, okay, I'm dealing with anxiety, and either it's a disorder or a situational, and then you have to start observing yourself to, okay, what situations are making me anxious and why. And that why piece is real strong. So once you keep healing and you start being really honest with yourself and someone's walking you through it, you realize, okay, the why may be experiences from my childhood, but when someone acts similarly to what you saw, then that makes you anxious.
Yeah.
So you have to start making those connections for yourself, and then you can start kind of talking more to who's supporting you on like what you need. So it's just like, okay, when I kind of talked about earlier with me and Ryan, like we don't do yelling because anxiety and hypervigilance comes up. So we like have to be really intentional about our tone, even if it's just like you're passionate and anger are two different things.
Yeah.
But you know, you got to be very careful with that, because I've said, hey, when you yell, it reminds me of XYZ. Or even if it's like you're just being passionate, like just be aware that for me, like it makes me shut down, or all I can, I'm getting angry and I can't even hear what you're saying at this point, you know? So, being able to cope is the person who's experiencing the mental health condition be able to, because that's your responsibility. You can't just put it all on your partner to make you feel better.
Come on.
You know?
So, and it's hard work. But it helps.
It is. So it's just like, okay, I'm feeling anxious right now. Some people deep breathe or take space or ground themselves. So like I kind of say like it's talking yourself up. Like people say positive affirmations and it's become a buzzword, which is kind of annoying to me. Yeah. But it's just like, okay, like I know that I'm good at this. Like talk yourself up before you have to do something that makes you anxious. Yeah. Like, okay, I'm a great speaker. Like I don't need to be nervous about this. I'm good at this. Like, do whatever you can to be your own cheerleader. And that can help you navigate those anxious moments until you feel less anxious. Oof. So like that's a good way to kind of ground yourself. Ground yourself in facts. Like, you know what I'm saying? I did this, so I can do this. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Or it's like, I don't need to be anxious having this conversation with my marriage partner because every time we've had this conversation, they have been open and listened to me. Yep. So you really have to like train your brain to like go back to the evidence. Yes. When you're having these things come up.
Ooh, that's good. Yeah. Now, because you brought up coping, and I think that is something that's really important to do just for yourself, having the appropriate coping mechanisms. Right. Because a lot of times people go towards things that aren't productive. Yeah. Unfortunately. But I want to get into coping mechanisms within society today. And like, what am I trying to say? With the things that are going on in the world. Right. So we had the racially motivated shooting in Buffalo, New York, and then we had the school shooting in Texas. This is a lot. This is a lot for people to process and to go through. These are real people. Right. One, these are people with family members who are feeling all of this emotionally, internally, and then also just on a citizen scale, right? As people who are watching this on the news and on social media and just everywhere. It's everywhere. Right. What are some coping mechanisms for society? Like, just, you may not even struggle with anxiety or depression, but this stuff, I want to say I'm 99.9% sure it impacts you. Absolutely. Like watching this, seeing this, especially as a person of color, especially as a Black person, with the Buffalo shooting, right. As a parent with the school shooting, like this is heavy stuff.
Very heavy. And you don't have time to process it before something else happens.
Ooh, Jesus.
I say be graceful with yourself because new reactions could emerge. Like for me, like I started finding myself, even knowing, like even with education and things I have, whatever, I still find myself being anxious about grocery stores and large gatherings after that happened. And I didn't want to address it in myself that I felt that way. But I'm like, I don't really know if I want to go in there. Like, I don't know what could happen. Facts. You know what I'm saying? Because when these things happen, I feel like people who, they have some type of spirit in them where they want to do things like this. They feel like they can get away with it. And to me, it creates a fear where it's like, okay, if they keep allowing these things to happen, then they're just going to keep happening.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's pretty like fair for people to feel anxious. Right now.
Yeah.
Like they have to be honest and, I mean, truthful about their emotions, you know, because it's really awful. It's atrocious.
Yeah.
Like,
I was
having
a conversation with someone, and they had children, and I was like, you know, this was the day after. And I was like, you know, how are you today? And they're like, oh, you know, in general, or like because of the school shooting. And I'm like, both. Like, how are you? Because what people fail to realize is that, like, when you see something like that, it doesn't just say, oh, I feel this way about that, but my emotions for everything else are different.
Right.
Like, you're a whole person.
Right.
So, yeah, maybe I'm asking how you're doing today at work, but, like, you can't leave that at home. Like, you can't leave that emotion of what you just witnessed or what's happening in the world at home or in your personal relationship. Like, you are one person.
Right.
And so he was like, oh, you know, it sucks, but blah, blah, blah. Like, he really kind of downplayed it, unfortunately. And it was just interesting to me because I feel like as a society, we really try to ignore. I don't know if the word is ignore, but, like, I guess maybe diminish those feelings that arise due to situations like that.
Right.
Like, it blows my mind.
I think people respond differently, you know, and it's not that they don't have the same feelings. Some people are like, this emotion is threatening to my ability to function.
Oh, that's
so
good.
I'm going to stuff it so that I can function. And I feel like a lot of highly sensitive people do that too, where it's just like, this is so overwhelming, I can't even touch that right now.
Yeah.
And then there's people who feel pretty comfortable expressing how they feel, and so they express even more.
Yeah.
Then you have people that's like, okay, I need to retreat. So it's just like, you really just have to know how you react to emotions.
Yeah.
To develop the appropriate coping skills. So like, I already know I'm highly empathic, like highly sensitive. So like. When things like this happen, I can't watch certain shows where it's like people are dying and stuff because it's just like, ooh, that is just too close to what's happening in our world right now. I can't even take it in. So while other people, they can watch TV and they'll be fine. Yeah. But it's just like, you have to like really know yourself, be honest. Like you can't say, I don't, you know, I'm not feeling that, or I'm okay, I'm doing X, Y, and Z. You really have to be honest with your emotions. And we typically feel at least 3 emotions, you know, at the same time.
Okay.
So it's just like being able to name those, which is hard. Yeah. Like we like distance ourselves by saying, oh, it sucks, it was really hard, blah, 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 instead of saying things like, I'm frustrated, I feel hopeless, I'm scared, I'm sad. You know, we struggle with just saying like those negative emotions. Yeah. But that keeps us from processing. Yeah. We don't do that.
And I think that just made me think about like when the George Floyd situation happened in 2020. Noah was maybe like 7 months old. And I remember being in that space of just like, I don't want to talk about this. Like, because it was just so, the emotions that I felt were just
terrifying.
Terrifying. Yeah, like literally, I just had a black son. He's 7 months old. And then I'm witnessing this black man get murdered on TV. You know, like it was a lot. It was a lot. It was a lot. And I feel like I can empathize with people who like don't want to discuss it. But I also remember the reality of like what it did to me by not necessarily discussing it. And not that I had to discuss it with people. Like, oh, my family or at work or anything like that. But just like with my with my therapist and my clinician. Because I feel like that in and of itself caused anxiety. That ended up manifesting itself in other ways. So I'm suppressing this emotion, but in this time, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm fine. Like this is terrible, but like I can't even think about it. Like, and I'm thinking that I'm doing good, but then next thing I know, stuff starts to unravel in other areas, and it's like, baby, and not that was the only thing that was going on around that time. We know it wasn't, but you know, just not processing and what that does to
journal,
a person.
Like if you know that you're a person that stuffs, like journal. And then being able to have, you know, a safe, like, attachment figure, and I would say that's Jeremy, like being able to, the person that you really trust with your feelings, being able to talk about it. But I think journaling is really good and helpful, like, and doing the type of journaling where you don't edit yourself. So just like nonstop writing in just every train of thought. Don't worry about the sentence structure. Don't worry about if it makes sense. Don't worry about like it's just unfiltered writing until everything is out, so that it's not swirling in your minds over and over again. So like that type of journaling really helps. Some people like to like use different colors to highlight certain things or scribble drawings, anything like that, to really just flush the things out of your mind so that you can kind of like have a better understanding of your processing, so that you're not just carrying it around all the time.
Right. And you mentioned just a minute ago, like how you're typically experiencing 3 emotions at one time, right?
Yeah.
How do you encourage people to identify what exactly they're feeling? Me and Jeremy have talked about getting an emotion wheel, but like, what are some ways to identify exactly what the emotion is?
Really just self-reflect, you know, and that's hard. It's really hard if your survival mechanism is not to really deal with your feelings. So it really takes some time to be able to admit how you feel about something, and then allow yourself to feel it. Like I can identify with stuffing. Like for a long time, I would stuff just so I can keep going. Just so I can keep going. And after a while,
stuff don't stop.
It don't. It's like things don't stop. I have to keep going. I think a lot of Black women do that. And it made it hard for me to cry at one point. Like I really struggled with crying, no matter how sad I felt. Because if I felt really sad, I'd say, I'm going to cry about this right now. I ain't never crying about it again. And that's how I would cope. And then it was like, after just going through certain things and dealing with what I stuffed, then this overwhelming emotion would happen. And that's how you create the depression and all those things start to emerge, because you have so many unresolved feelings and you're just kind of carrying it around with you.
What are some resources that are out there, and these can be free or at cost, that can help people with dealing with their mental health or preventing them from experiencing things like anxiety and depression? I know I've talked about this before, but like for me and Jeremy, one thing that I use to help us find our therapist is like therapy for Black girls and Psychologists Today, and just a few other resources posted on social media. Like, hey, any therapist, or do you guys know any therapists? But do you have any additional resources?
So those are 2 really good ones. I always go to Psychologists Today so that you can see therapists in your area, see what their specialties are. That's super important, seeing what their specialties are and their approach to therapy. Because if you're talking to someone that's super formal and you're like kind of chill, you're like, man, I don't even feel like I can talk to you. You know, so you really need to figure out who you're compatible with so that you can establish long-term treatment. You don't want to just go to somebody for one time and then never go back, because there's a treatment plan that gets established so that you improve. So you like be really intentional about who you are going to connect with as far as therapy. I do think sometimes we think therapy is the only way to like deal with how to create coping mechanisms. So I would like look at the things that you enjoy. So it's like if you like riding your bike, or like for me, painting has always been that for me. Those are good ways to deal with your feelings and how to kind of transmute that energy off of you. So like if you're a person that has to deal with their anger, rather than holding that anger and frustration in your body, go play a sport. Like go play basketball, go to the gym. Like there's other coping mechanisms that can help you with your mental health if you commit to it. And I don't think people think about it like that. They think that the only way is therapy. And therapy is great as far as processing like trauma or events and just having that assistance with it. But also it's like the self-care things, like making sure you're, if I go to a chiropractor, because that helps with alleviating stress out of my body. Because sometimes my joints get, especially after the baby thing, it's just different. You know, just finding a physical activity that you enjoy, hiking, you know, being in nature. Like being in nature is super grounding. Like yoga, just whatever fits you personally, just commit to it, because that's going to, I feel like, tie everything together. Like that holistic, you know what I'm saying? Going back to mental health being holistic. Keeping those things going and committing to it.
I love that you mentioned like self-care and how you have to figure out what it is for you, because I feel like on social media there has been a lot of things going around about like, oh, this is self-care, like get your nails done, get your feet done. And then there are people who are like, oh, that's not self-care, that's not self-care. And the reality is it's self-care for somebody. You know what I'm saying? So like putting this box around what self-care is like, asinine to me because it differs from person to person.
Tell you what worked for you. Like, I mean, and even for me, it's frustrating. Like, as a social worker, seeing all the advice from people that I'm not really educated, and it's just like you're sending people off. You know what I'm saying? So it's like for someone, a spa day is self-care. And that's their self-care. What they got to do with you?
Nothing.
You know?
Nothing at all.
Nothing. And like for expression, like dancing or like changing your hair and makeup. That can be self-care for someone. Like it's not, you don't got to be like, oh, they always doing all that. You don't know if that is a part of their mental health. Like doing that for themselves, making themselves feel better, like pouring into themselves that way could be therapeutic for them. So it's like, don't
try to judge people's self-care. Like, why are we judging self-care? Like, how did we get here?
Right. That's like completely like the last thing you want to do in this conversation is like judge people before they do stuff.
Yeah. No, that's good. Well, that really concludes like everything that I wanted to talk to you about today. One, I thank you so much for diving into these topics with me. I think it's so important for us to talk about mental health as a community. I know Jeremy and I share, and one thing that we like to say is like, one, we are not clinicians. We don't know shit about shit when it comes to the education piece of it. We just know our experience. Right. And we do feel like sharing our experience helps other people. Right. It may not help some people, and that's perfectly fine, but we do think there are people out there that our message can help. But having someone on who is actually licensed to talk about some of these hard things is really good. Because again, me and Jeremy don't know at this point. Like, you know, maybe later in the future, Jeremy may know. I ain't never going to know because I'm not going back to school for it. But, you know, in the future, it may look a little different. But again, I just really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you for having me. And I mean, honestly, what you and Jeremy are doing is so important because it's like, you're being vulnerable, you know what I'm saying? And you're creating spaces for these conversations. Yeah. And, you know, especially for Black people, it's hard for us to trust who we're talking to and giving this part of ourselves to. So it's just like what you're doing is super important so that we can move our community forward, you know, and be more transparent and healthy, just healthier. So I'm just happy that you invited me on.
Yeah, that is really the goal. Moving the community forward and really just opening up a space to have these conversations. Because one, it's not easy. Like I was never super open, but I was definitely more open than Jeremy. So the fact that we've been able to really just come on here and talk about this stuff has been God, honestly. Like a lot of it has been God. But we're just super grateful for the people who are willing to also come on and be vulnerable. So thank you so much, Brianna. I want to use this time to just have you highlight all of the things you got going on, any of your business adventures or anything that you have going on. Please take this time to highlight that so that we can find ways to support you and so that our community can also support you.
Okay, yeah. So me and my purpose, right? Let's just start with purpose. I accidentally hit the mic. We are kind of on this journey and we have like a heart for family, you know, family ministry and like how to represent that, you know, in a realistic light.
Absolutely.
So we do have our platform, the Lewis family, and on that we just share our different experiences. Like we laugh, we pray, like that's like we are ourselves. Like we're not perfect, but we are who we are. And I feel like every family has their own chemistry and the way they operate. And it's just great to see, you know, that the value set being seen over and over. So we have that platform. And then I also have my platform, Brianna Lewis Art. And on there is where it's just mostly my artwork that I'm doing. I've done art for 10 plus years. So I do custom artwork for residential spaces and commercial spaces. I showcase I've done a lot of Midwest work, but I'm hoping to expand out. So on that page, you can see the different things that I've done with my artwork.
And you recently, you may not want to toot your own horn, but you recently did one. Can you talk about one? I don't want to say
the
one
I want
for
you to say the midwife. Okay, so I did a portrait of Lucy Jacob Stewart, and she's a Black midwife, and it's just been recognized at a conference in California that talks about health disparities and how you know, we contribute to history. Yeah. And so by doing that portrait of Lucy Jacob Stewart, we were able to talk about Black midwives and how they were actually the foundation of, caring for women and delivering babies.
Yeah.
Which is something that people don't talk about, how Black women contributed to that space. With that, there were lower deaths and birth mortalities.
Yes.
So it's just really important that we go back to how we see healthcare. And, you know, today, just because it's a hospital doesn't mean it's the best place for you to be delivering your baby. And just being open to, like, what the facts are saying. You know what I'm saying? Because we have to figure out ways to protect ourselves and our families. So yeah, and that's like the official representation of Lucy Jacob Stewart, because there is no photo of her.
Come on.
So yeah, so that is what's in the memorial for her. So
come on. Definitely had to give that shout out. Yes.
Yeah, thank you for noticing that. So I need to toot my horn more.
Yes, you do.
Really do.
Yes, you do.
I really do. But yeah, that was an awesome opportunity. And yeah, so the memorial project was in Liberty, Missouri. And they did pretty much an event to memorialize her and other midwives who are trying to pretty much uprise.
Absolutely.
Especially with like all of the birth-related deaths. And like say, hey, like we are knowledgeable and we can contribute in this space.
Yes.
Because sometimes I feel like people look at birth being a certain type of way, and it's hard to trust outside of that. And I'm even guilty for that at one point. It's just like, if something go wrong, you know,
I need
facts. You know, so it's just being open to that conversation and knowing your history and knowing that, no, we contributed to this and we have really good outcomes for it. So.
That's good. And when I seen that, I was like, I didn't know. Like, I literally, so it's really the lack of knowledge just surprises me all the time, especially when it comes to like our ancestors and like what Black people really been doing. It's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, we out here.
Been out here.
Still out here.
Come on. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for being on today. We truly appreciate you. That really concludes the episode. Baby, am I missing something? Nothing? Okay, awesome. Well, thank y'all so much for tuning in to today's episode. Make sure you're liking, following, and subscribing to us on all social media platforms. Also, make sure you are following Brianna Lewis in all of her platforms and all of the greatness that she has going on. Also, don't forget, event at Kindred Spirits when? June 11th. Thank you. He can tell me. I just remember. But event at Kindred Spirits, June 11th. It is going to be the time of our lives. We are super excited. We're doing things a little bit different. We'll have more information on that to come. But it won't be the typical day party. We're going to put a different spin on it. Similar to like a live audience situation. I don't want to drop too much, but it's going to be fun. So y'all be sure to check us out that day. If we don't got nothing else, we'll go ahead and let that ride. See y'all later. Bye.